From Provo, Utah, this is the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast with your hosts, Joseph DeGolier and Caleb Schweiss. This is Ultima Final Fantasy. Welcome to another episode of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast. I am Joe.
And I'm Caleb.
And today we're going to be sharing our part 2 of our interview with Aniero Grigori of Limit Break Radio. A fantastic interview. This time he's going to go into the show that they're doing now, which is A Radio Reborn.
Correct.
It's great stuff. So stay tuned for that. Schweiss, where are you in Final Fantasy XIII?
I'm glad you asked that, because last night at 1:15 or so in the morning, I finally got done upgrading all of those godforsaken items and platinumed the game.
Yes, and there is proof. I begged you to get on Twitch and make sure that you streamed that last part.
It's true.
Yeah, explain to me, or tell our audience, yesterday, what was your day like yesterday?
Well, it was a lot of me sitting on my ass and just grinding. Oh. It was, it was the grindiest thing ever to get that platinum. Now, I mean, I understand that the platinum isn't the game itself, so I'm not gonna hate it just because of that last 20 or so hours of my life that I threw into just mindlessly attacking the same stuff. But, I mean, so I need to hold every item in the game, right? And, that counts the second tier upgrades for all the weapons and all of the items as well.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And the problem with that is, and I didn't realize this, because the only items I had upgraded were like a catalog and a couple other things that were really simple. You just upgrade it and it levels up and it turns into that item. So I thought, all right, the items are going to be easy. But then I got to one of the items, and it ended up costing me, I don't even know, it was like 500,000 gil probably to upgrade completely. Because I needed to spend a ton of experience, level it up a bunch, and then I went in and bought a 220,000 gil item to get it to the next stage, and then I had to do that again to get it to the final stage. And I was like, if this is how they all are, I'm never going to get this thing. So I'm freaking out, and then I finally get that one done, and then I start bombing them because they're only 30k each for the upgrade items, and then I get to some more items, such as I think it's Kaiser Knuckle, the power glove turns into.
Yes.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's
the
a
knuckle
great item
of power.
Yeah, and that one
use that one on your mom.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Sorry.
That's disgusting.
Keep going.
So with this one, the final upgrade for it, after I leveled it up and everything, which wasn't an insane amount, is the dark matter item. And that thing, I either spend 800,000 in the shop to buy, or I get a 5% chance for killing a
5%?
Yeah, 5% chance.
Okay, I would say fuck the 5% chance
to kill it with Sheolong Gui, which surprisingly difficult considering he has a quarter of the health as his gigantic brethren roaming the plains, but he's sick. And I killed probably 50 of those yesterday. They only took 3 to 4 minutes.
Why would you waste your time doing something for a 5% drop rate when you could just
buy it?
When you could just buy it.
Well, it's 800,000 gil.
Yeah, but
that takes me almost an hour.
Yeah, but still.
I got 3 of them in an hour.
But if it takes you 5 minutes for a 5% chance, that would be 100 minutes.
I got them faster.
Every drop. Well, then obviously it's more than a 5% chance.
It must be, because but that's what the internets say, that it was a 5% chance to grab it from that.
The internet can go fuck itself.
Yeah,
Except for this RSS feed and Libsyn.com and our new UltimaFinalFantasy.com.
Yeah, check it out. It's still under construction. But,
it is still under construction, and we'll have an announcement when it's fully formed, which it should be within the next 2 weeks. It should be done. You can already become a member and join our forums there. It's just a There's nothing on it right now.
Right.
Our website is a brand new baby. So we've been working hard on it, and we hope you guys enjoy it. I mean, it's a good looking site, and it's got a lot of functionality. You can rate the games, or you will be able to rate the games. I only have the rating widget for Final Fantasy II up, but they'll be up for every single Final Fantasy, and you can rate our episodes. You can give us a thing out of 5 stars, so you can tell us how we're doing when we're done with the episodes. If you feel like doing that, please do, because we'd like to know. I mean, we put our own rating on there, but we'd like to see what the average is on certain episodes, see what we're doing right, see what we're doing wrong, and stuff like that.
And then I think the game one is really cool. We can have our own little Metacritic style rating system where everyone's
it's a little bit more simple than that. It's like out of 5. So if we can always see kind of what game is highest rated,
right?
According to the website. So
and what was the website again? UltimaFinalFantasy.com?
It's UltimaFinalFantasy.com. You can go there, find every single one of our links, YouTube, Twitch, whatever. But if you need to know more, it's youtube.com/UltimaFinalFantasy. You can find us at Twitter @UFF Podcast, Facebook.com/UltimaFinalFantasy. This website is brought to you by Patreon and our wonderful Patreon donors. So please support us on Patreon if you don't already, or you can give us like a one-time donation on PayPal. We really do appreciate those. We have used the Patreon money for this website.
Yeah.
We had to get like a professionally done theme for WordPress, and like we had to move our stuff over to DreamHost, and that cost a few bucks. Not that much money, but the theme cost quite a bit of money.
Oh yeah.
And so like in order to get this fully functional website to you, we had to have the Patreon. So we want to thank every single donor for Patreon, and Dave will get that song up in the next 2 weeks. You hear me?
Oh wow.
You will have it by the episode that comes after the Final Fantasy XIII Part 2 review. I'm assuming there's going to be a Part 2. If it's like a 3-part review, it'll be after that one.
I hope it's not that long.
So after the Final Fantasy XIII reviews, that first episode will have the new Megadeth Final Fantasy song. And speaking of Megadeth, there is a new Megadeth song out there. So any Megadeth fans, especially if you were a Pledge Music a pledger
yeah,
like I was, I pledged for Megadeth's new album. They have a single released, and so go check it out. It's called Fatal Illusion, and it's really good.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I know that has nothing to do with Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it's got a little to do with Final Fantasy.
All right, well, let's talk about Final Fantasy a little bit more. Let's get to the news. All right, so there's only 3 pieces of news this week. If you'll click on that Twitter link right there first. Now, the Final Fantasy V game, of course, was released on Steam, and apparently there's issues with it.
Oh, that sucks.
And this one dude here on Twitter, his name is Bill. Let's see.
Yeah, Bill.
Bill
at Zaboyd.
ZBOYD. And he has a status here that has a screenshot of Final Fantasy V, which looks really weird considering we played the PS1 version, so it didn't quite look like this.
Yeah, not quite.
And apparently this guy is like a pixel artist, so I guess he knows what he's talking about. At least that's what the article said that was given to us. So he listed 12 things that were wrong with the entire picture. It says, first off, the high-res textures don't mesh with the overall lack of details in the scene or the simple tiled look. You can see the seams between the tiles. Why did they smear ugly black gradient along the rock surface? Sad attempt to give depth. Rocky surface doesn't bend around the curve. Texture is flat despite curve. Fails to look like the rock texture is curving or turning with the map design.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Apparently,
they kind of just darkened it, I guess.
This is his professional opinion.
All right.
The grass has a bizarre edge to it between the rock step and the grass field, with that awful gradient and weird smooth edge to it. So basically, he's very disappointed in how it looks. He says the whole thing is generally blurry at 1080p, other than the razor sharp tile seams. So he's saying the textures are kind of bad and that the tiles are like, oh, okay, yeah, they're kind of jaggy.
Yeah.
On the sides. It still wouldn't bug me enough. I mean, it is an old-ass game. So the other option is to pull up a standard definition version of the game through analog video, and in that case, it will be very blurry.
Yeah, good luck playing that on your high-def TV.
Yeah, so, I guess Square had some issues with this game, but I don't really see it.
No, it looks all right, I guess.
If there's any other issues with Final Fantasy V's port to the PC, you let us know.
Yeah.
All right.
When you find something good, come to us.
No. All right. So Square Enix's mobile game, Lord of Vermilion Arena. Did I say mobile?
Yes.
Okay, I meant MOBA. As in like League of Legends and
right.
Blah, blah, blah. All right, so they added some Final Fantasy stuff to the game, including Bomb, Toneberry, Omega Weapon, Cactar, Marlboro. I'm sure that'll be fun to play.
Yeah, that'll be irritating.
So I guess we're going to check that out whenever that actually happens. I don't think we'll ever play it for this podcast, though.
I don't know. I don't see why we might be able to if it gets released here. We like MOBAs.
Yeah,
we like League at least, so
well, if it's free.
If it's free, I'm not going to
definitely check it out.
I ain't paying for no MOBA.
Man.
I know better. I know better than that.
And our last little piece of news here. By the way, all the news this week was submitted to us by Shinru. And so we want to thank him. He always submits news. He doesn't have to, but he always does, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
our last piece of news here is Final Fantasy XV. They replaced the automatic weapon switching with real-time weapon switching.
Oh,
apparently, you're going to be able to switch weapons using the D-pad manually. Otherwise, it'll just be set to your normal weapon. So that's actually kind of a big change in the gameplay. Because I know when we played the Final Fantasy XV demo, you would just hold down the square button and then the weapons would switch automatically in order to get the best, I don't know, I guess I've been playing 13 a lot, so stagger on the on the guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is interesting. I didn't expect this change.
Yeah, that'll make it kind of feel a little more realistic, I think. But
it'll be a lot more activity when you're moving around.
Yeah, it'll add a whole different level of
You're not just going to be holding
maybe.
one button while you're doing your stuff.
Which is something we were concerned about in the beginning, was the one-button gameplay, just sitting back like...
Well, we didn't even realize there was a one-button gameplay thing.
Yeah.
Remember, we were still mashing the button?
Yeah, true. I wasn't just holding it. Yeah. It's not right. It's just not right.
It's counterintuitive, but this'll...
I did the same thing through 13.
This'll simply make the system more complicated, which I'm guessing people are into with action stuff.
Yeah. I was doing a lot
more
of that
skill-based.
With 13, though. Like, in between waiting for the bars to fill up, I just press X, like, subconsciously.
Dude, I do too.
About it.
I'm like...
I'm just so used to just die from 10. I spent way too long playing 10. Yeah. Platinum that bad boy.
So that's all we have for news for this. Schweiss, let's go to our part 2 of our wonderful interview with Aniero. All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so what is your connection to Aetherite Radio?
All right, so when Final Fantasy XIV was first announced, Limit Break Radio had become a very noticeable part of the Final Fantasy XI community. And we had made friends and connections with other podcasts like Pet Food Alpha and Level Down and all of the shows that were on the Limit Break Radio network. And I think there were other ones out there that I'm just blanking on their name right now. But we had developed really good relationships with them. And we had also developed a really good relationship with the Final Fantasy XI, the guy who ran the Final Fantasy XI wiki. And when Final Fantasy XIV was first announced, when it got publicly revealed, like we had heard about the Rapture project for a long, long time, and there was a lot of speculation about it. And when it finally was announced as Final Fantasy XIV, Limit Break Radio actually had like kind of an internal crisis at that point, because we were like, okay, who has the intention on making the jump to 14?
Yeah, are we just gonna move on or what?
Yeah, do we all move on as a show? Do we make Limit Break Radio 14? Like how do we structure this? Does Limit Break Radio just do content for FF11, or how do we tackle FF14 content? And so after talking internally, we discovered that while all of us were still devoted to playing FF11 at that time, that only a few of us had the intention or interest in playing or picking up FF14. And because of that, like we just didn't know what the structure was going to be moving forward. And so instead of forming something internally, and I think some of these other podcasts and websites went through the same struggle, where they had some people that were really gung-ho on 14, and they had some people that were like, yeah, but I'm going to stick with 11 because that's what I really like this. The more enthusiastic members, the more enthusiastic people for 14 ended up banding together in this project that ended up becoming called the Eorzeapedia project. And the idea was that we take the talent from Limit Break Radio, Pet Food Alpha, and the wiki, and we all kind of combine forces, and we create a super site for Final Fantasy XIV where people can find FF14 themed media, but also have a resource like the wiki, which was so central to success in FF11. And we had assumed that, of course, a wiki will be just as necessary for FF14. And so we together, we came up with this concept of the Eorzeapedia project and Aetheryte Radio, which was going to be the flagship podcast for that. And we set out starting that. And for a while, it was mostly a wiki site, and we had a podcast portion. And then at some point, I don't remember when this happened. I honestly don't, because I had kind of started to step back from the project a little bit, like take a backseat role after I'd started to question my own interest in FF14. But I still like doing Aetheryte Radio a lot, and I liked that show. And anyway, at some point, and I just don't remember what the circumstances were for it. Eorzeapedia became Gamer Escape, and they became a much bigger brand with larger ambitions, where they wanted to branch their site out into not only just providing information about FF11 and FF14, but the game Wakfu as well. And there was talk because Square Enix at that time was the publisher for that, and we had I think that was at maybe Square Enix's behest. But anyway, yeah. So there was a lot of talent that was involved with Gamer Escape, and then it was another one of those things where, like, the FF14 1.0 came out, and that was a huge blow to morale.
Right. Yeah.
That was a huge blow to morale for everyone at that site.
Yeah, Square even.
And there was a lot of bleed in terms of talent that didn't leave for any kind of like mismanagement reasons or anything like that. But they left because they were just disinterested in.
They left because the game sucked.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That had a lot to do with it.
How much of 14 did you play? Did you play?
1.0?
Yeah.
I played a good portion of it. I played nearly all of it, all of the storyline. Like I had a level 50 warrior with all of my AF gear and halfway completed relic by the time they had turned the servers off. So I had done quite a considerable amount in 1.0. And so, yeah, that's why I continued to contribute to Aetheryte Radio. And there was a portion of Gamer Escape. Like for a while, I was really on board and I had envisioned myself as sort of a media coordinator. And we had tried to launch something called Gamer Escape Radio, where it was sort of like there was general theme. There was like general gaming themed stuff. And there was a Shoutcast server that was like a 24-hour, music and show, content stuff. And there was, plus we had the wiki and the podcasts and stuff too. So I really wanted to be like the manager for the media end of the site. And, for various number of reasons, it didn't end up working out. The Shoutcast thing never really ended up taking off. Nobody really listened to it a whole lot. The community surrounding FF14 1.0 was very small. And so we just felt like we weren't gaining a whole lot of traction. And I have to admit that I was one of those that I fell victim to the disinterest bleed. I kind of phased out of the project. And they moved on. They continued with their brand and continued with Aetheryte Radio. Excuse me. But what ended up happening? This is kind of interesting. I don't know that anyone knows about this or I've talked about this at all. But there was a time where when we were conceptually bringing back Limit Break Radio, because I was finding out that Juxta and Kahlo were interested in coming back for 2.0, and that they had a very natural interest in the game, and I might be able to convince them to do a show again. After that happened, we Limit Break Radio actually, like after a while, when we formed after we formed Aetheryte Radio, Limit Break Radio actually became a part of Gamer Escape, and we did maybe our last show or two under the banner of Gamer Escape. And we shuttered our forums and diverted all of our forum traffic to Gamer Escape's forums. And we never shuttered the site. We never shuttered our limitbreakradio.com. That always stayed active, but we would dual post our content between limitbreakradio.com and Gamer Escape. And I think at some point it may have even redirected to Gamer Escape. So for a while, Limit Break Radio was a Gamer Escape entity, and when the show ended, it was a Gamer Escape entity. And Refresh, when it started, was also a Gamer Escape entity. I had envisioned that as a much more like general content. There was some gaming segments in there, but it was more like general content show, right. and which never really took root. And at some point we parted ways from with Refresh from Gamer Escape. And when the idea of bringing back Limit Break Radio started to become serious, we had approached Gamer Escape about doing Limit Break Radio for 14 in conjunction with Gamer Escape. And what they said was that they were concerned that our show would get confused with Aetheryte Radio, or would somehow detract from Aetheryte Radio, and that they wanted to keep Aetheryte Radio as the only show for Final Fantasy XIV, and that if we were interested in doing Limit Break Radio for 11, that they would strongly encourage that, but that if we wanted to do a 14 show, that they weren't interested in hosting it
because they already got the 14 show.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's when we officially parted. Limit Break Radio and Gamer Escape parted ways. We reclaimed our web space. We started around that time. We started actively posting some teaser stuff about coming back for 14. We had like a little like teaser promo thing
trying to get all the audience back.
Yeah, that kind of like it sounded. I had sort of made it sound like I was retesting all of the old equipment, like I was like, you know, dusting all the old shit off and
nice.
and stuff like that. So you know, we started to hype up the audience, and we got a lot of really positive sentiment when we started talking about bringing the show back for 14. And it was that wave of sentiment that was like, yeah, we should really do this. This sounds like a lot of fun. And initially it was me, Juxta, and Escalia that we had put together as the original crew. And it just so happened that Kahlo had that weekend off and decided to come accompany Juxta to hang out at my house for the weekend. I had just moved into a new house, and he wanted to just come down and party and hang out and just chill. And just because he was there, he ended up doing a segment with us where he like broke into the room, and it was a really funny, like good nostalgia bit. And like it kind of recaptured, I think it may have recaptured something there, and his interest in the project grew, and so we were able to convince him to be a host. And it was the four of us, and then it was Kahlo that actually came to me and said, I've been talking to Nika, who she was called Vicky back in the 11 days. Mm-hmm. Been talking to Nika recently, and she'd really love to be involved with the show again. And I was like, yeah, totally. Like, let's do that. Cause I'd lost touch with her, as a result of my bitch of an ex-girlfriend. And as, kind of the project, the LBR for 11 had kind of fallen apart.
Right.
And so it allowed us to reconnect and that's how we brought her on. And, originally we were very, sort of dead set on like, no, we want everyone to be in studio like the old days, where we were all in the same room and we all kind of lived close enough to each other where we could make that work. I had initially had some concerns when he suggested Nika, because Nika lives out of state. And I was like, all right, well, we'll just try it. We'll try it and see how it goes. And she was automatically such an amazing addition to the cast that we were like, yep, it's the five of us. That's how it's going to go. And, it's funny. I should mention how Escalia kind of came to be part of the crew. Because I didn't mention that as a part of the 11 portion of the interview. Mm-hmm. Escalia was a host for one of our network shows called Voices of On a Deal. But even before that, Escalia had kind of just approached me as sort of just a fan of Limit Break Radio and had mentioned that he lived in an area that I grew up in. And he mentioned that, like the specific city that he lived in, when he went to high school, I had my first real job at, like my first like high school, like real like job. It was at a record store, but it was not just a record store. It was sort of like an all-in-one. Like it was mostly a record store, but it was also kind of a pawn shop, and it was also kind of a head shop. You could buy bongs and whippets and
nice.
Sounds like a record shop.
Yeah. But it also had it also had this like really awesome video game section where you could really find some rare gems. And especially at the point where I started working there, none of the people who worked there knew shit about video games. So I was able to come in and scoop up the, the non-classic edition of FF7 and
nice.
I was able to like find all of these like super rare, like a Chrono Trigger original SNES cart. I know that's not super rare, but I mean like people would come in and sell these and they'd buy them for 25 cents. And then I would turn around and buy them for 25 cents. So like, Final Fantasy 2 and 3 on SNES, God, what else did I got so many cheap, awesome games through that place. It was fucking incredible. And he used to come there and shop for video games, and we used to talk all the time. Like it was like it was sort of like I told him where I had worked. He told me where he grew up. I told him where I worked, and he was like, "Yeah, I used to go there all the time and buy video games." And I was like, "Yeah, I was like the dude who used to sell video games because nobody knew shit about video games." And he was like, "Wait, were you the dude that always used to wear plaid pants and had bleach blonde spiked hair, kind of like a knockoff Billy Idol, like a shitty Billy Idol?" I was like, "Oh, that was me to a T in high school, baby." And he was like, "Dude, I used to talk to you all the time. Come in and talk to you about video games all the time." And so he had expressed this idea of like maybe doing coming on the show, and like he came up and visited the studios up where we used to do them at our college and hung out for the weekend, and we got to know each other. And that's like sort of where our friendship came. And he, like, I think I may have approached him about doing, like, he had expressed the desire to want to do a podcast. And I was like, well, I've got this idea for an all call-in show, and it's got this great name called Voices of Anadil. Like, would you want to do that? Like, would you want to like put a crew together and host that show? And he did it. Like he put Voices of Anadil together. And that's sort of like where I had connected with him from, and always thought that he was always a really good creative force in that show. And I always thought he was really funny. And so, of course, when we started to tap network talent for hosts, he had done a couple of sit-ins as a host for Limit Break Radio in the 11 edition. And when I had found out that he wanted to play 14 as well, he was kind of a natural fit for bringing in early on. And it's funny now because, we kind of like he's sort of established his character as a bit of an outside, like he's a bit of the butt of a lot of the jokes on the show now.
That seems like his role.
Yeah, it totally is. And he's like, and he totally gets it too. Like, again, how Juxta was like in on the joke the whole time. Like Ascali is another, like he when we had talked about our specific characterizations, because when we brought Limit Break Radio back, we did it with a lot of really specific things in mind. In terms of programming, and we talked about characterizations and how we wanted our characters to be portrayed. And he had sort of like envisioned maybe doing his character sort of like a nighttime talk show host and a late night talk show host. And I was like, yeah, dude, go for it. Like, if you want to develop that persona, like, go for it. And like, as we sort of like figured out what the core crew was going to be, he like sort of settled into this position where he was the butt of a lot of jokes. And I was really worried that like we would have some of the same concerns that we had early on with like Wally, that like, but he totally gets it. And he totally understands that it's like, that's the joke. Like, a lot, and in terms of even though he was there, he was like maybe the second or third person that was attached to the beginning of the project. Like, we all have such kind of a lineage together from doing the show for so long that, yeah, like he is kind of the newbie to the crew, and he totally gets it. He totally understands what the joke there is, and it's totally awesome. And it takes a lot of maturity, and it takes in my mind, a true performer to really understand that role and to understand it well. So I got to give him all the credit in the world. He does. He does awesome, and he holds his own. He says some of the funniest shit on the show. Like, I laugh the hardest at some of his jokes because he surprises me a lot of the time. So he's really good. He's really, really good in that role, because it seems like the dynamic that we've formed, we always need a punching bag. There always needs to be someone who's taking the abuse, and of course he understands the joke, and that's really key to doing that bit. So
hey, so I do kind of remember in the FF11 version of the podcast, you used to bleep curse words.
Yes.
So what made you decide to, first of all, bleep curse words in the FF11 days versus now when it's, fuck this, fuck that,
free for all,
fuck you?
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with just the general sort of sentiment. Like, it doesn't matter where you, like, first of all, shit's all over the TV. Like, everyone says shit. FX programming says shit a lot. So it was like, we used to bleep shit and fuck. And arguably, it made it funnier. Like, it made swearing funnier.
A good bleep is funny.
Yeah.
It is. It really is. Because when you hear a lot of these old clips that we were playing, listening to the other day, yeah, man, a well-placed bleep is just hysterical and can really enhance a joke. But I think that content, and I mean content that people consume on a regular basis, has gotten to the point where fuck and shit is all over the place in terms of not just podcasts, but like, people go to YouTube far more for their news now than they do terrestrial broadcasting. And I think that was just a lead that we were following in terrestrial broadcasting at first, that when we looked at bringing the show back and we looked at the changes that we wanted to make, we were like, okay, instead of aligning ourselves more with terrestrial broadcasting, like, let's just go kind of full bore where new media is going, and that is the direction of not giving a fuck about
the Scorsese direction.
No because even when you listen to an NPR podcast like Serial, they'll drop fucks, and it's like, if they're doing it and they think that it's okay, like if that's acceptable, then fuck it. Like, why? Like we were kind of always like we weren't edgy. I don't think we were edgy before, but like we were a talk show that like also sought to entertain, and we did some funny stuff. And so just like I just think the nature of the culture in general made us change.
I would pull my fucking hair out if I had to go through all of our episodes and pull out every curse word.
That was another thing. That was so I mean, there were a couple of things that, like, when we sat down to redesign the show, that we did specifically, and because we learned a lot of shit from the first iteration of the show. And the first is that, like, the original Limit Break Radio was heavily edited. We edited I would edit every single second of those old shows because I wanted to develop my skills as an editor. And I looked at this as a way to do that. And to naturally edit the human voice and speech patterns. And it was a great way to do that, but it was a shitload of work, and it made for a lot of expectation, but it also made for a really high quality product because we didn't have a lot of those weird pauses that other podcasts would have at the time. Like, we wanted to, even in the early days, we wanted to set ourselves apart from the competition. And I knew that automatically being a producer and having my media training, that would automatically allow us to stand out. And I wanted to make sure that I went the extra mile to make sure that it was a totally, like, professional presentation. And in those days, it meant editing because our performance wasn't, like, we were definitely still gaining our legs as performers. Even me, I'll cop to it. I was not the greatest performer, even, with every intention. Like, we're way better now. So, like, the first thing is that we don't need to edit our shows. Yeah, we do them live, but like we're so much better at what we do now, and we're so much more natural now that it just editing wouldn't add anything.
Yeah, that's more or less how we've become, because we do our episodes live on Twitch now.
We copied you guys.
Yeah, and it's like
it's a good avenue.
Yeah, the screw editing. I mean, I just barely started getting into it with our knockoff fan fiction erotica show that was our distancer from like probably half of the audience we could have had. But and it's. I don't think we could have done it in the beginning. There's no way.
No, we couldn't fill the silence. That was something that we really had a problem with. I would say something and I'd wait for Caleb to respond. And then he'd look at me and he'd be like, "Is it my turn now?"
Yeah, like we just sucked. So I feel you on
tough.
it.
That is a really tough dynamic to work out. And I get a lot of shit for this on my own show. Like, my own audience gets really annoyed with me where I have a lot of vocal pauses and ahs and ums. But it does fill, and I stutter a bit too, but it fills the silence. And that's a media training thing where you don't want, like, commercial radio is really specific about that, where it's like no dead air. You don't ever want a moment of silence on commercial radio. That's like a sin. And so you've always got to keep the conversation going, and especially between two people. Yeah, that could be really hard, which is why I structured my show with 4 or 5 people around me, so that it's kind of natural that somebody will always be there to pick it up.
It's a good idea.
Never dies down. Never.
Yeah, that's how we keep the energy so high. But I think I've gotten a lot better about finding ways to fill silence gaps over the years as well. But the way that we used to address it is I used to edit every single second, and because I was doing that, bleeping just kind of it was like not even a big deal. It was just an additional click that I had to do. I was doing it anyway. And so that's why we made that change. But there were a lot of other considerations that we made when bringing the show back.
Yeah, what are some of the other differences between the FF11 version and the 14 version of Limit Break Radio?
Yeah, and I'm afraid I might be revealing maybe a little bit too much of our programming strategy overall. But yeah,
it's all right.
Says the competitor. Says the competitor. It's okay.
Oh, we're hardly your competitor.
We're only after one podcast and one podcast alone.
Final Fantasy Union is going down in the next 3 years.
Yeah, you can have 14.
You can take it.
When we came back, like, it seems like every time I'm like, yes, I get really gung-ho about Limit Break Radio, it's because of some kind of, like, I feel slighted in some way. Because the original, as I said, I sent an email to Fusion, never got an email back, felt like, okay, fuck you, I'm going to do my own show then. There was, I'm going to call him out too, I'm going to call him out by name. There was another show, there was a 14 show. And granted, Limit Break Radio hadn't produced any 14 content at all, but there was a 14 show called Lodestone Radio.
Oh, I've seen that around.
That when I listened to it, I went, oh man, this really sounds familiar. This sounds a lot like what we used to do with Limit Break Radio. That's interesting. And, they tried to put together some interesting production. And they even went as far as to take some swipes at us in their show. They would answer email. I'm using air quotes when I say email because I don't think they actually received any legitimate email. I think they made it all up themselves. But they received an email on one episode where somebody apparently an audience member asked them, well, who does all of your work for the website and all of the production and stuff. And I don't know. I don't even know who the asshole was that ran that show. But one of them went, yeah, it's all done by us. We don't have any interns that do the work on this show. And I was like, oh, okay, that's how it is, right? That's definitely a shot across our bow because there's no other Final Fantasy podcast that has interns. Yeah, okay. So like that wasn't even the thing that pissed me off. Like that just kind of got my attention. But when I started to listen, like when I listened really closely to their intro, I realized that they used the Black Mage's version of Man with the Machine Gun, which was the song that we used in our intro since the beginning of Limit Break Radio. And I confronted him on Reddit, and I'm sure that if someone wants to dig through Reddit archives of drama bullshit that you could find this. But I called him out in a Reddit thread and I said, hey dude, I absolutely don't have the rights to that music. Like there's nothing that can make me compel you to change that other than like, I feel like with our show, we made that iconic to us. And it's kind of shitty that like you feel like you can just come in and take that even if we're no longer an active show. And I forget exactly what his response was, but it was something to the effect of like, yeah, well, Final Fantasy remix music is actually really hard to find. And I wanted something that was like that was like really rockish. And I wanted to use the Black Mages and, they've only got so much music, and that was the one that jumped out at me the most, and it was like all of this excuse mongering bullshit, And I was like, okay, like I wrote him back and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's so much Final Fantasy remix music. There's such a wealth of it out there. Like, how can you say that you felt pigeonholed into just using the black mages? Like, fuck you, dude. So I put together an entire alternate intro that was just this like heavy metal intro because I found this great. I was like, okay, Man with the Machine Gun. Yeah, we kind of made that iconic as our intro music. Like, I bet I could find an even better version of Man with the Machine Gun from, than the one that the Black Mages did. And that's exactly what I did. I went out and I did a Google search and I found this excellent version by this dude, Daniel Lambie. And I put it together and like, just as sort of like, it can be fucking done. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You need to use Black Mage's music. Like, no, you absolutely don't. And so I had this intro just like put together and lying around from this thing that happened. And so that's the intro that we use now. Like, that's the heavy metal intro that we
is that Husky by the Geek? Is that what that is?
No, Husky by the Geek. Well, actually Husky by the Geek is the outro music. The intro,
okay. All right.
Yeah, the intro music is the Daniel Lambie version that we ended up going with, and Husky does do a great version of Man with the Machine Gun, and I absolutely have the intention to sit down one day and do another version of our intro because it's just fun for me. I'll do there have probably been 4 or 5 different versions of our intro that we've had throughout the years. It just changes because I get bored with it. And the next version that I do will feature nothing but Husky by the Geek music. Yeah, that dude is so awesome and like has been so cool about us using his music that like I sort of feel like Limit Break Radio and Husky by the Geek are a bit linked intrinsically. And so I really do want to become a bit of a platform for his music, and he did such a wonderful version of Man with the Machine Gun that I'm definitely going to stick to that theme. So that was like, that's where we kind of came in with a little bit more like heavy metal, black and white imagery. Like I was in a punk band and so like I can't do art. I'm like not an artist, like I'm really, really bad at Photoshop, but I can make punk art like a motherfucker. And I can like turn it, like it's super easy. You just make a grayscale, turn it full contrast, black and white, and you're done. Like that's it. You're done. That's the whole thing. And like maybe tear it out and like cut it out or like put, staple something together. That's it. That's all that punk artwork is. And I was like, I know how to do that. That's in my wheelhouse. And so it ended like having this intro put together was like, I can work with this. Like one of the big problems with the FF11 version of Limit Break Radio is that we wanted to get like professional artists involved in like, doing our banner head for our website and doing like our t-shirts and stuff. And when you do that, when you like kind of like contract out work like that, especially to like people you don't have the budget to pay and that are doing it out of the goodness of their heart, like it's really hard to expect things on time and to like try to do anything with any kind of like regularity. So like one of the things that we learned, we don't want an artist. We don't want to be sitting around and waiting for banner art for an episode because, someone had a date that night that they had to go to. And so we have to use like a generic banner for a minute. It was like, okay, I need to be able to do this so that I know I can do the work. I can do it quickly. I can do it efficiently. And so that's kind of where we got the whole like kind of black and white theme from, as well, like, and the heavy metal punk rock thing really worked with that. But then there was also this very real thing that when we decided to launch, a show for FF14, it wasn't right at the launch of 2.0. It was actually sort of more close to like the mid-cycle, like maybe like now where 3.0 is in its life cycle. Like now is where Limit Break Radio stepped in the 2.0 content cycle. Mm-hmm. And so there were already a ton of established podcasts out there for Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, obviously, we've already talked about Aetheryte Radio, who was established as far as back as 1.0. But continued, like they still continue to this day.
There's Gamer Escape, there's Sequence Break.
Yeah,
there's a few.
Sequence Break was out there at the time. Mr. Happy was actually doing a show called XIV or XIV Nation. I can't remember, but he was kind of involved with that, and that came out of Gary Gannon's camp of content, where at the time where he thought he could just make content for any MMO and not actually have to play it, and it would be amazing. and
Good luck
clearly
with that shit.
Clearly that backfired on him pretty big.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there were all of these other kind of established shows that when I listened to, and also there was like Lodestone Radio, and there was a whole bunch of other smaller stuff too, that, when I listened to them, they were doing their own thing, but a lot of them were like heavily informed or heavily influenced by the format and the structure that we had set with Limit Break Radio. Like, I'm sure whatever Sequence Break, if you guys end up hearing this, I'm sure I'll hear from you guys and like, no, we didn't rip you guys. No, I'm not saying that anyone ripped us off, except for Lodestone Radio. I am saying that they.
Well, you had something that worked.
Yeah.
We've ripped off a couple of your things. We got a heavy metal intro. We got. We got the
and it's natural, like, and that's fine. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Limit Break Radio is an amalgamation of the Howard Stern Show, Drew and Mike, Opie and Anthony, and you know what I mean. Like, it's an amalgamation of like, and with like a little bit of Mystery Science Theater 3000 stuck in there because that's what I loved. You know what I mean? Like I understand that like we're gonna influence the media that comes after us, but the other thing that I couldn't help but realize like everyone was kind of like riding the middle ground. You know what I mean? Like everyone was sort of like playing it safe, and like we did that a lot with the 11 show of Limit Break Radio. Like people would call us community figures, and people would say that our show was so revered and respected, and we started to kind of like believe that, right? Like we started to think of ourselves a bit as community leaders, and that would influence a lot of our behavior on the show. It would influence a lot of our bits. A lot of times we would hold back our own opinions or our own bits, and we would kind of be a bit of a cheerleader for FF11. And I'm going to cop to that because like the game was hurting, and we could tell that the game was hurting, and we really just wanted to try to remain positive so that people who would come to the community would feel welcome. And that influenced a lot of the a lot of the discussions and a lot of the opinions that we would craft on the 11 show. And we were also very, very, very much aware that Square Enix was listening to the product. So we kind of didn't want to piss Square Enix off because we wanted to interview them. Like we wanted them to be involved with the show. And, in the 6 or 7 years that we did Limit Break Radio for 11, like we didn't get much out of it from Square Enix. Like we got some interviews out of them, but when we sat back down and like really did a gut check, we were like, well, what did all of that like contorting our opinions do for the show versus what did it do? Did we win any ground with Square Enix? Like because of that? I don't think we did. Like, I don't think they saw us any better because like we, held back on a bit, like,
right.
or tried not to offend somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that really influenced their opinion of us.
Well, from what I hear, all you're doing is offending people now.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the other thing is that, with all of these other shows, sorry, I need to take a drink. So with all of these other shows that were playing it safe and like giving a lot of benefit of the doubts and kind of like, oh, come on, guys, like, let's not, do that. Like they were just very riding a lot of the middle ground. I was like, there's a vacuum at the end for people being fucking real. You know what I mean? Like, just like there's this, like, no one's actually talking about the game in the sentiments that I'm seeing in game. Like there are people who are frustrated with that. And like, instead of like maybe trying to be the bridge between Square Enix and the community, maybe we should just like let our opinions fly a little bit more and not hold back as much.
Bring in some of that punk rock into it.
Yeah, and
some of the rebellion,
and stop giving so much of a fuck, because like, what are we getting out of like giving a fuck, you know? And like positioning ourselves, it gives us a unique positioning against shows that are doing what we were doing, playing it safe. Like, we acknowledged that we played it safe, and so we could see that reflected in the other shows. And I'm sure, I'm a little bit nervous that some of these other shows, that this statement is actually going to filter back to them, and they're going to take a little bit of offense to that they would play it safe. But no, like, I think because that's what we did with the 11 show, that we could recognize when it was happening elsewhere. And because we could recognize it happening elsewhere, we were like, well, then that, like, it's sort of like we were like, well, then isn't it going to be a little bit more compelling if when we come back, we're not the same show and we're defying people's expectations?
You got a reason to listen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if we were the exact same show for 14, like first of all, 14 isn't a game that lends itself to sharing information like 11 did. You know, like 14 explains exactly.
Your hand
you can play the fucking thing.
It explains exactly what it wants from the player, and so that whole like need for reading a wiki and the whole need for being didactic, that gets chucked out the fucking window.
Right.
You know, like, and we were like, how do we do a show based on that? And we were and. So the formula that we all kind of came up with together is like, okay, well, we have to. What was great about the 11 show? It was the entertainment. It was the bits that we would come up with. It was, you know, when we would talk about the game, not reading off the wiki, but talk about our experiences with it. So let's focus on the entertainment aspect of what we do well, and hopefully that'll resonate. And it won't even matter that we're not like explaining exactly what to do, because, you know, there were already folks like Mr. Happy that were making these incredible walkthrough videos on YouTube where we were like, a podcast just doesn't serve sharing information about a game like Final Fantasy XIV anymore. Like, it just can't. Like, YouTube is a way better way.
YouTube has just totally thwarted that.
Totally. And people have figured out a fantastic format inside of YouTube by which that information can be presented to the viewer. And so we recognized that we would not be efficient trying to play that game. And so we were like, let's go full bore entertainment. We're going to go, you know, we're not going to go half-hearted with our opinions. We're not going to care what Square Enix is going to think. We're not even really going to care what our own audience is going to think, because there's going to be a lot of people. You know, like, that was one of the things that was actually one of the things that happened a lot with the 11 show, is that we would play it safe and still offend people. Like, we would still, you know, like, we would do a bit and we would think that it's really funny and hold back maybe the funniest part of that bit because it would offend a couple of people. And, or we would do it and edit it out. That happened too. That would happen too. And so like we were just like, even with all of the restraint that we showed, it didn't gain a significant ground with Square Enix. With all of the restraint we shown, it didn't stop people from being offended. So why hold back?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't gain us anything. If we're going to be pissing people off anyway, fuck it. Like, let's just piss them off and deal with it.
Yeah.
And if, you know, like, and if Square Enix doesn't like what we're doing, then I don't know, let them tell us. So, you know, like, they didn't give us anything. They were mostly silent in our 11 days.
Hashtag
they're
get
going to
good.
continue to be mostly silent. Fuck it. Like, let's just do a show that we find fun. And that's kind of how we reprogrammed Limit Break Radio for Final Fantasy XIV. And there was also this really real realization, like, we knew that we held stuff back and we played it safe in the 11 days because we did use Howard Stern as a model for the show. But like, we knew that we weren't trying to be as edgy as those guys were. And, you know, like that we were a lot tamer than that. And we were like, you know, if that's going to be the show that we are, like, let's just lean into that, dude. And like, let's just like, let it run through every part of the podcast, from from the branding to the presentation to just absolutely every part of it has to be soaked with attitude. And the best comparison that I can make to it is I was like, like, did you guys watch wrestling in the 90s? Like, it's totally modeled after the New World Order. Like, that's 100% what it is. It's what we decided to do with the show is, in wrestling terms, called a heel turn. We were a face. Like, if you think of Limit Break Radio, we were a face character for FF11. A lot of people looked up to us. A lot of people thought that we were a really good influence for the community at that point, even though, we were just doing what we thought was the fun thing to do. And we decided, like, okay, a heel turn is really interesting, and we'll come back with way more attitude, way more edge, because nobody expects that. It's like Hulk Hogan becoming a bad guy.
It seems like it's worked out. It seems like all this has worked out very well for you guys.
But it's compelling, though. Like, that's the thing, is that, like, as a narrative, like, we were like, yeah, it's going to piss some people off who were 11 fans, fans of the 11 show. But like maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe that's an okay thing, because, like, it's compelling. They'll probably keep listening because they find what we do outrageous now. And they're, it was a big gamble for us to do. And we gambled a lot with the brand. We gambled a lot with the show. And, the other thing that we had said was that, I think a big misstep that a lot of podcasts make is that they don't let themselves establish an audience before they start asking things from their audience. And you have to know exactly what you're asking of your audience when you make the ask. Someone submitting an iTunes review or submitting an email or, even making a call to the show, like, that's a fairly small ask, right? And we would even have trouble, like, when we did live shows, we did a couple of attempts at a call-in show. We had one successful attempt, and then we had a lot of failures at call-in shows. And so it really kind of reinforced, like, what you ask of the audience has to be completely reasonable, and they have to be on board, and they have to, like, want to have the desire. So you just give them the means initially, and you don't structure your content around their involvement, and you just hope that their involvement comes along in time. So we never structured the show so that any show is dependent on a call or is dependent on an email. We have to program every show as if we're not going to get any of that shit, and assume that we're not going to get any of that shit, and then look at it as a bonus when we do. And so I think because of that, we were way more hesitant to come out of the gate asking for money and asking for support. And we were far more concentrated on establishing the brand, establishing the product, and establishing the new narrative, because we knew that not everyone would jump ship to this new idea of, an edgier, more opinionated Limit Break Radio, and let that idea take root first before we did anything like attempt to launch the Patreon or ask for funding or try to get the show funded or anything like that. So that also accounts for the weird structure that we had with the part 1, part 2, part 3, where we would just sit down and we would do massive recordings and then break them up into 3 parts and release them over a couple of weeks. So.
We were kind of jealous about that format, honestly. We were like, gosh, we're doing this weekly. Maybe we should do what Limit Break Radio does. And then, of course, your Patreon stuff exploded and you went down to weekly episodes, as far as we can tell anyway.
Yes, we do weekly episodes. We hold 100% to that. We said, if we get funded at this level, that Limit Break Radio will be a weekly show, and we will be able to, because, like, the way that we looked at it is like, look, if you're willing to give us money for this, then, we're going to invest the resources that you're giving us into making a better product. And the biggest criticism that we got out of for Limit Break Radio, out of all the criticism that we got, because we had very long shows and sometimes people were very turned off by the length. Sometimes people were turned off by the content, and we got a lot of criticism over the years of doing the show. But the biggest thing that we always got was we want more Limit Break Radio, and we want it more often. And because we were students, when we were doing the 11 show, and because, we all work and we all have real lives outside of doing the show, making it weekly without being able to account for things like, Juxa and Kahlo live probably a good like hour away from where I live. You know, now there's like in the past, it used to be like, okay, yeah, you know, we've got to figure out like when in our class schedules we can all have free to like meet in the basement. But now it's sort of like, you know, we have to adjust our work schedules, and that has an impact on our ability to make rent and earn income. You know, they've got to expel, you know, like they've got to pay for gas to get down here, and, you know, totally stuff that we're willing to do and investments that we're willing to make because we love the show and we think that it's a fun thing to do, but we're only willing to do that to a point. You know, like I'm not willing to lose my job. And so we had gotten to a point like where we figured out like, yeah, it's reasonable for us to get together once a month and record a super long show and then break it up over, you know, a couple of weeks to make it seem like we're serving more content regularly. And it's, you know, like, they spent all that money on gas. Like there was like, we had no Patreon, we had no PayPal. We weren't taking in any of that. That was the investment that they were willing to make because they loved the show and they believed in the idea. And as the creator and the manager of the show, I was not willing to ask them to do more. Like, I know that everyone wanted us, like the sentiment in the community and, you know, among the audience was like, yeah, we'd love to have this more often. And what we said was like, okay, we'd love to be able to do it more often for you, but these are the real restrictions that we're running up against. And this is what we would need to be able to do it. And, you know, so it was really important for us to be able to, establish that brand before we felt comfortable making the ask, right? Like, it wasn't about, you know, it's not about like looking greedy or anything like that. It's about earning the right with your audience to ask for their funding, to ask for their investment, because they become at that point a part of the show, and they have to there has to be something there for them to invest in. And we thought that was such an important conceptual concept. And I'm really lucky as a creator. I'm really lucky that I have a crew that does legitimately believe in the product, and that does legitimately believe that it was something important enough in their lives that they were willing to make not only financial but time sacrifices to do this. You know, because that is the death knell for many podcasts, and so, you know, like, we really thought hard about like, okay, what are the reasons that people should give us money? What do they get out of it? And like, how do we use that money to produce a better, more regular show? Like, that's the thing that people want the most. And so how do we do that?
Right.
And the thing that we found out is that we need resources. We need to be able to, you know, say like, we need to be able to account for all of us having to take a day off of work. Like, you know, and the only way that we can do that is to incentivize it with some kind of income. We're really transparent. I feel like we're really transparent about the way that we use our money. We pay ourselves very little for the show. Like, all of the money that we collect is like collected into a single fund. And then like, we have to do stuff to earn money out of that account for us to use. And, you know, like, there are different stuff. There's stuff that's set aside for different things like equipment and travel. And, you know, like, and we only feel like that's fair. Like, we have to put it would be shitty of us as an organization if we were like, hey, give us your money, and then we used it in improper fashion. Like, we want to make sure that, like, you know, like, this is an incentive for us to keep doing it. And you know, that you have to like look at other actual businesses. Like, how do they do it? How do they keep people showing up to work every day? Oh, they fucking pay them. Oh, that's how they do it. You know what I mean? Like, and so like, that's, and I'll be honest, man, you know, I've never really wanted to like start my own business, but ever since, you know, we used to take PayPal donations to help cover equipment and server costs in the 11 days. And we had actually raised a couple of $1,000s, enough for us to travel out to like the couple of years of the Final Fantasy Fan Festival. And, you know, like I always felt like, you know, like we're getting all this money. Like I'd love to be able to come up with a way that as, you know, as like, as someone who is like kind of the responsible party for creating the project, like I want to pay my participants. I want to be able to like provide jobs for my friends. You know what I mean?
Right.
And funding is a huge part, you know, like seeking funding is a huge part of that. And I'm not much of a salesman. I don't sell shit very well. And I hate feeling like because we felt like I kind of felt like we were sort of under almost the yoke of Square Enix in the 11 days. And I'm so hesitant to go back to that with any kind of like sponsorship or funding from a company that I was like, we got to just make the ask to the audience and
let the audience support the show.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what Patreon's all about.
Yeah. And, you know, whatever they decide to want to give, like, that's cool. Like, that's fine. They'll get some stuff out of it. But like, really, the idea is that you're supporting the show. And yeah, we've seen great success, a really fantastic response, more money than I ever thought that we would ever bring in ever, you know, like we've been able to establish a really good foundation. And now it's provided us, you know, a platform to be able to break out into general gaming talk shows like, you know, Final Encounter Cast. And, you know, we'll end up making more. Like if Final Encounter Cast is a thing that people feel like they can give, you know, put money behind too and fund at some point, you know, once we earn the right to make that ask, then, you know, like we could potentially, you know, like the potential here is pretty great. Like, I think that we've got the thing that we have going for us in Limit Break Radio is the five of the people, the dynamic that we have between the five of us. That's really the thing that people support. That's really the thing that we capture. And, you know, now it's kind of an experiment. Like, you know, we've done it for this game. Can we do it for something else? Can we do it for video gaming at large, which, you know, hopefully most of our audience should be interested in the first place. And now how do we make that bigger?
So is that the future of Limit Break Radio, you think?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think that, you know, in the past we tried to branch out and get more rooted into one game with the Limit Break Radio network back in the 11 days. And that didn't work out. Like long-term, that's not a good content strategy. And I think we're at the point where we're looking at long-term content strategies that are not necessarily married to the success or failure of a single game. You know, and that's not to say that we're backing off from our commitment to the Final Fantasy XIV community or servicing them by any means. This is, you know, where our foundation was. This is where our bread is buttered. We know that. Like, we're not so stupid as to divest resources from Limit Break Radio and put them into Final Encounter.
Right.
It's why Final Encounter kind of has this like varying weird schedule that is kind of unpredictable, because it's not, you know, like it has to, you know, like we're not divesting resources from what we're doing with Limit Break Radio. Like, you're going to get a Limit Break Radio each and every single Sunday, 100%, because that's what you're paying for. You're maybe going to get a Final Encounter Cast. Maybe if we can make it work, if we can make it schedule properly and stuff like that. Like, we have every intention of pursuing that as an ambition and everything like that. But
plays second fiddle for sure.
It has to play second fiddle because, again, you know, we are people with jobs, and it's not, you know, like, yeah, we're pulling in $1,500 a month, but that's certainly not enough to fund a 24-hour content network. You know, Machinima doesn't run on $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and we would love to get to that point, but more funding would get to that point. More funding is the thing that would enable us to get to that point. And we recognize that we haven't earned the right to make that ask yet. You have to pay your dues and earn the right to make that request of your audience. And then at that point, it provides you an opportunity to maybe expand to the other thing. That's really how I feel about it. And going with a user supported model as opposed to like an advertiser supported model, I'm far more confident in content that we put out, and far more confident and sure of what we put out into the community. I think it's different. I think it's unique. I think it's unlike any other FF14 podcast out there. It has a lot of passion and energy, and those are also things that are kind of lacking in video games media. I think that when you go to places like game trailers, or you go to places like IGN and you look at their content, I think you see a lot of repetition of successful things like The Nerdist, or a lot of influences from places like G4, and that's fine, that's great, but I don't think that it makes very diverse content. I feel like a lot of the content is very samey, and you get a lot of these personalities that are completely interchangeable between brands and shows. Like I how many more spiky haired, snarky, halfway sarcastic guys do we need talking about video games?
That's true.
Like it's kind of getting a little bit old, and so I sort of feel like there is a bit of a vacuum for a voice and an attitude like a Howard Stern type for the video game community. And, not to open this gigantic can of worms, but the whole gigantic bullshit that surrounded Gamergate really hammered home that there is a kind of like homogenized point of view in the video game media. And so there is an audience that's hungry for someone to come along and sort of like, quote unquote, tell it like it is, and get angry and get passionate about things. And so that's kind of like, that's what we're sort of trying to establish with Final Encountercast. And hopefully that stands out against a lot of what is out there. And, right. And I'm not just like, I don't want to sound like I'm a Gamergate sympathizer either. Like, I'm not saying that we're trying to actively court people, who are like, yeah, it's cool to harass women. That's totally fine. We're absolutely not trying to court that audience, because I think if a lot of those guys actually heard what I had to say about Gamergate, they would be really upset and really offended. But there is a sentiment of anger and frustration that I think can be harnessed in terms of programming. And so, yeah, that's definitely what we're seeking to harness.
Yeah, all right, so we got to wrap it up just a little bit. I got 3 more questions for you. You ready for these?
No
all
problem.
Right. So we're about to start Final Fantasy XIV in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah,
right?
about that.
Nice. All right, cool.
And we're going to try to make it through the main scenario in like 2 months if we can.
That's doable. That's doable.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have any advice?
Do I have any advice? Just keep do quests, keep following the arrows that the game points you in, because it's very, very obvious where it wants you to go. You can, if you're really just looking to get through the narrative, man, you could play that game solo. You don't even need to get friends to help you. You kind of put me on the spot. Like, I don't have a whole lot of, we did an entire show. Here's the thing. Like, my context for 14 is so vastly different from what you will end up experiencing and playing, because all of my levels were gained at a point at 1.0. Like, I've never experienced what it's like to be a fresh player to A Realm Reborn.
We have to play it in a different way, because we're going through all the Final Fantasies in a row, and then we're going to go through spin-offs and sequels and all that other shit later.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to look at even the MMOs like 11 and 14. We're trying to look at them as a Roman numeral Final Fantasy and how it fits in the series. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking through it. So I know most people play MMOs in like a very, open way. They go wherever they want. They build up their armor or whatever. When we're trying to like, okay, we got 2 months. We got to do the story.
No, the story is very linear. I mean, you need levels to progress through the story. That's the first thing. But the leveling system is pretty quick. I mean, if you're devoting enough time to it, you'll be able to get to 50 within no time. XP is not hard to, it's not a terribly grind heavy game.
It's not like 11.
No, it's not like 11. And even 11 now, it's
pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So I mean, like I would say it's on pace with how quickly you could like max level a character in WoW, probably after Burning Crusade. I never played WoW, so that's just a very, very, very rough approximation. But the answer, like, not long. I don't think it'll take you long to get through it, and I think that's a good assessment for FF14 because you know what? Honestly, I think it holds. Not only does it hold up, I think it outclasses a lot of the narrative weight that the Final Fantasy series has had in the last 10 years.
Speaking of the Final Fantasy series, we have a question here from Krenital. Was it Krenital? It was Krenital, right?
I think so.
Do you have a favorite Final Fantasy? And if it is, what is it? I mean, not the MMOs. I have a feeling that they might be 11 or 14. What's your favorite Final Fantasy?
No, not even. 6.
No? 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Because 6 is the correct answer.
Yeah.
6 was an amazing game. 6 and 7 were both really incredible games. The biggest thing for me is narrative. Like I'll play a game that doesn't play as well if I am really hooked into the narrative. Fuck, I played through all of Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops and Acid, and it's just because I'm like that invested in that
universe.
Well, yeah. I get it.
Yeah, so I just 6 from a narrative standpoint is the strongest. It's such a fantastically well thought out game, and it played so well. And 7 also had like again, I'm gonna go back to Ares dying. That was such a groundbreaking narrative moment in video games, period, and was such a brave moment that I've always, I kind of measure a lot of what Square Enix does up to that moment because it's like nothing has ever hit me with that narrative impact. And I think that that's true for a lot of Final Fantasy fans across the board. And I just that era, 6 and 7, even though I found 6 very much, later on, I didn't play it as an SNES game at the time. Found it later on when I started to become very interested in RPGs. I think that is the standout the best in the series.
I agree with you. Caleb thinks 7, but
yeah, only because of the bad guy. I think his backstory makes more sense. Although he doesn't win.
Sephiroth,
Sephiroth versus Kefka.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you, Aniero Grigori, for coming on to our show. You were a great guest. We're going to have to split this into 2 separate episodes, so we'll give you a link for that. Where can our listeners find Limit Break Radio?
As if they haven't already, but...
Yeah.
We can be found at limitbreakradio.com. You can also, if you want to interact with us every once in a while, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/limitbreakradio. We're at Limit Break Radio on Twitter, and you can catch live episodes each and every single Sunday at generally around 2. Sometimes we have varying times, but each and every single Sunday at twitch.tv/limitbreakradio. So all things Limit Break Radio to find us.
All right. Thank you, Aniero. This was eye-opening and a wonderful interview, and we're so glad that we hardly ever had to talk.
Yeah, it's nice.
so different than some of the other people that have come on the show.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things that I get from my crew all the time where they're just like, shut the fuck up. Just let me talk. You know what I mean? Like... And fortunately, they're one of the few people. Like I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I know when I can stop talking now. I tend to ramble a lot. So
well, it's perfect for this kind of open format here. So
yeah.
It does. It serves you well in talk radio. That's for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so once again, we want to thank Aniero for coming on our show and being. What are you saying, Schweiss? And being willing to chat with us.
I'm not saying anything, Joe.
You were saying something.
You said it all, my friend.
Oh my God.
No, yeah, thanks a lot. That was a great interview.
It was a great interview, and now we did say we were going to start 14 in 2 weeks on the interview, just barely. The fact is, we recorded this interview early, as you guys should know, and so we are actually starting 14. By the time this episode comes out, that will be our first day of Final Fantasy XIV. So today, if you're listening to this on Monday, today is our first day of Final Fantasy XIV. And what's our schedule going to be like for Final Fantasy XIV, Schweiss?
Well, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're going to be on. I'm going to be getting on around 6:30 each of those days and playing until I am done, which will probably be around 11. And what about you?
I will be the same, except that on Tuesday I'll be on a little later. So just in general, get on at 6:30 on Final Fantasy XIV. We'll be on the Brynhilder server Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Correct. And we're both going to be playing on PS4. So.
We will both be on PS4, but we haven't decided whether or not we're going to use the TeamSpeak chat or the PlayStation chat.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that, see which one will be more viable.
It might be better because some people will be on PC, and you can always get that little app, the Android app for TeamSpeak.
For my phone, yeah.
So we could all be on TeamSpeak, but I don't know how we're going to get the audio from TeamSpeak,
that's the problem,
into the thing.
It'll seem like I'm just some babbling idiot just talking.
Unless we get an HDMI streamer thingy and just have it separate.
Oh, I don't want to do that. The whole point of doing the PS4 was how easy it is to stream.
We'll see. We'll figure it out.
All right, we'll figure something out.
Yes, something will be figured.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, well.
I just wanted to repeat everything you were saying. So let's answer our last two non-Final Fantasy XIII questions. Let's get to it.
All right.
Questions for us. We would like to hear from you. To moments. Or contact us on Twitter. Get on and ask your questions. We'll answer them. We will. This is the question segment. Asking you will receive.
All right, what's our first question?
All right, so we have one here from Schnitzel Time. Sorry,
Schweiss was making disgusting motions on the. You can see it on the Twitch chat.
Yeah, I was giving the mic my peace of mind. So this one's from Schnitzel Time. It's titled
of mind.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Oh.
It's titled "Hardest Gaming-Related Decision You've Made," and I hope we haven't answered this already. I don't think we did though. What is the most difficult decision you've made related to a video game that you can remember? Could be either a purchase, choice, etc., or just the most difficult experience you've had, anything game-related. He's had one for each. He's got one for each of those, and they're both somewhat different questions. When he was 14, his Xbox got the red ring. That sucks. Like 50% of them got that,
because
I
you
think.
bought an Xbox.
Yeah.
Go.
So I had to mail it to get it fixed. Being jobless and lazy, I was basically giving up several hours a day of my life with that month or so of no Xbox. He had just gotten Gears of War 2 at the time and was addicted to it, so he went a little bit insane. The decision-related story is a lot less terrible, but still a bit difficult. Last year, he decided to give up video games. Oh, God. In addition to most other hobbies, for 6-ish weeks, so he could study for the MCAT after work. He ended up allowing himself to play a couple hours on the weekends to maintain his sanity. That was difficult only in that his time was spent in the books instead of something fun, not specifically that it was given up video games. Okay. That part was still challenging, though, because it always had been his favorite hobby. You guys have any similar experiences and or decisions?
Wow.
What game-related decisions have you had to make? Like, I know there was the...
Should I play Final Fantasy XIV on PC or PS4?
Man, that is difficult.
That was a difficult decision. Fact is that now that I have the PS4 version, I could play on either. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so could I.
Who cares?
Yeah.
At that point. But I'm glad I have both. Wow, difficult gaming decision?
There was one at the end of Far Cry 3. Basically, you had to either...
You're talking about decisions in-game or
In-game.
A difficult decision for your life?
In-game.
Because that's what the question's about.
It's kind of both. He said related to a video game.
Okay. All right.
So, at the end of the game, you have either the option to cut your girlfriend's throat and remain a islander and living the life that you've been living throughout the game where you're basically a savage, which is awesome, and I totally wanted to because the chick's, she's less than desirable. Or I could not kill her in cold blood and fly away. And I was like, I don't want to do that either. I was like, I don't want to kill her because I don't like her, but I don't want to kill her necessarily. And so I just kind of, it was like a left click for one or a right click for the other. And I just like smacked my hand on both of them and I ended up not killing her.
Oh, okay.
The killing her ending is crappy though.
Okay.
Like, well, I guess it's what it is. But that's like the only thing I could think of. That or choosing...
Xbox over PlayStation?
No,
What?
that's an easy choice.
Easy choice, yeah. PlayStation all the way.
No, I don't know. In 6, there was one, choosing the weapon, the Ragnarok, or the spell Ultima. And I ended up going with Ragnarok just because you chose the spell and I wanted to try the other way out. Not as awesome. Still, I was doing more damage than Joe, but only one person could do that damage.
Instead of everybody having Ultima?
Yeah. Instead of everyone
Look at
doing
what
around,
you done did.
Well, I still slaughtered the end guy. I mean, He was nothing.
Ultima breaks Final Fantasy VI. It's like...
And it's like 3,000
It suddenly becomes
it
the
ain't
easiest.
that much.
No, it'll max. Like every time.
I wasn't seeing you maxing.
Yeah.
No, you were doing like 3,000 to each of his parts.
No, dude.
the
It was max.
I don't
Well,
remember that.
at the end, it splits the damage between
I know,
all
that's
of
what I'm saying.
Well,
But it's
not a
still
big deal.
disgusting.
Yeah.
But no, the problem I had was the part leading up to the end of 6, where my other party sucked ass, and yours had Ultima.
Yeah.
So Ultima is
So they
better.
were all kicking ass.
Yeah.
Damn straight.
I had to fight my way out of that.
Some people will completely disagree with you on the Ultima being better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know they will.
I
Because
chose
they're
the-
like, you can still get the Ultima spell in this bullshit way. So
Yeah.
you might as well pick the sword.
I picked the sword because it was awesome.
Yeah.
And because you didn't do it. I wanted to experience it.
A hard gaming decision in my life. And we are talking about video games, so these aren't actually real hard decisions.
They're not
to make.
real problems.
They're not real problems.
Oh, okay.
The hardest decision I've ever had to make with video games, there's not that many of them. So, League of Legends versus Hone. I had a group of friends that were playing Hone, and I had a group of friends that were playing League of Legends. And I'm kind of a slow learner when it comes to those type of games, and I picked League of Legends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
And
glad you did.
Now we got like Dota and crap like that.
Well, we had Dota before, but
Okay.
now we have Dota 2.
Okay.
Which,
Well, I was talking about Dota too.
oh, okay.
Schweiss, do we have any other questions here?
Yeah, we have one more. Kind of a
Okay.
lackluster question, Wink. All right, so this one is from Shinru on the forums. He says, Nobuo Uematsu always discusses how he's inspired by 70s and certain early 80s prog rock music. And he found some stuff that is similar to his work. This is Police Walking on the Moon. Just the intro part. All right, let's listen to it.
So he's asking if we think that this sounds like...
Yeah, he's asking if we feel like it sounds like Final Fantasy songs as well.
The Twitch stream might get muted. Go ahead and play it. Who cares? Yep. That's enough.
Yeah, that does sound like the Slums. We don't even need to play the Slums.
That does sound like the Slums.
All right, Pete Townsend song.
Okay.
Intro before the vocals.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Wow.
Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Okay.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that does sound like Final Fantasy tracks, and
Yeah.
it's because he obviously listened to that type of music. I know one that you didn't mention on here is Purple Haze and One Wing Angel.
Yeah.
Listen to Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, and then listen to One Wing Angel. Tell me what you think, guys.
Yeah, they're pretty. They are pretty
similar.
close, huh?
Yeah, he said specifically that song was an influence, so it's not like we found out.
It's not like a
something.
surprise.
Yeah, but it's definitely there. Shall we get on to iTunes reviews?
Yeah, we got a few of those to read this week.
Oh yeah. iTunes.
Reviews.
iTunes.
Oh yeah.
Reviews.
So we actually have quite a few reviews this
We have
week.
quite a few reviews this week. Thank you guys for giving us some reviews.
We really appreciate it. So,
All right, let's save that for last. Jesus, dude.
what, the nuke?
Yeah.
All right, we'll save.
You always got to save the best for last, and that's like the one that you want to go
All right,
to
then
first.
we'll read the Canadian one then.
You must be quite a lover.
If that's what you want. So this one's titled Awesome Podcast from Preacher 6556. I was searching for a Final Fantasy podcast forever. I tried Final Fantasy Union, but I found it to be boring and extremely negative. Really?
Shut the
Compared to
fuck
us,
up.
huh?
All right, you know what? I don't care.
You don't care what?
Sorry, I was just trying to be negative, and I just randomly spewed some words out.
And then I found this one and listened to one episode, finding it informative but light and somewhat funny. Oh. Then I listened to the swinging fan fiction with Tifa and Cloud in the shower.
Oh, Jesus. That was the worst one.
I was dying of laughter so much that
If
his
there is
girlfriend...
one fan fiction to listen to on this podcast, it is called Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction 5.
Yeah, that's a masterpiece.
You gotta have the stomach for it. I didn't. It is disgusting, but it is hilarious.
Yeah, that would
I'm
be...
very proud of that Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction
That would be
episode.
a greatest hits thing, for sure.
Man.
So he was dying of laughter so much that his girlfriend thought he was in pain. She then listened to it and was rolling on the floor with him. Why someone thought that what was in there was sexy at all?
Oh, you're not going to say what
amazes
was
me.
in there? We said it on the show already.
All right, fine. Why someone thought that pissing...
No, wait. You're right.
What the fuck
Sorry.
is wrong with you?
I wanted
What are
to
you,
talk
fucking
over you.
retarded?
They didn't hear you. Whatever. Keep going.
Even though that ended, which it didn't, this is still a fun podcast that gives an overall positive feel. Thanks and keep up the good work. P.S. Why does everyone hate on FF13?
Well, we'll find that out later.
Yeah, we will find out.
Well, you'll find out next week if you're a podcast listener. If you're a Twitch watcher, you'll find out today.
Yep, in the next little while. All right, so we got another one here.
For a second on that Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction. Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction is not over.
Yeah, it's a separate show now. It's got its own feed.
It has its own feed. If you look up Ultima Final Fantasy on iTunes, you'll be able to see it. Or if you just look up Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction, it should pop up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
they'll
started
pop up
our
for
separate
both.
show. I left the show. It's now being hosted by Caleb, and I call him Quiet Jake.
Yeah.
Jake doesn't know how to speak into a microphone quite yet.
Nope, it takes a little time. You have to make love to the thing. All
Yeah.
right, so we have another one here from Norway.
Wow.
Do you want to get this one?
Yeah. Awesomeness in podcast form. 5
thank you.
stars by Root of All Evil 94.
Well, I'm glad that the root of all evil thinks we're awesome.
I'm glad to. I've recently started listening to this podcast, and I've got to say it is by far my favorite FF podcast. The hosts are hilarious and have me laughing out loud, leading to some awkward situations at work. When I listen to the podcast, I would definitely recommend that you check these guys out. The podcast is thoroughly enjoyable, and I can't recommend it enough. Also, the Megadeth references make me smile, considering I am a guitarist, and Megadeth is one of my biggest influences.
Nice.
Yes, way to go. Wow, a heavy metal fan from Norway. That's odd.
Is it?
No, it's not.
Oh, I was like, what are you talking about?
Okay.
All right, so we have a couple more. These ones are from the UK, actually.
All right. You want to do your horrible British accent for our UK listeners?
Ah, dude.
I'll do mine. You do yours.
You go first.
No, I just did the last one.
A must for FF fans. By Magnum OIK. I stumbled across the show by accident in May and instantly subscribed. I listen to all of the main FF game reviews, back to back, and many in between. Since I ran out of the main reviews, I have listened to everything else, and I find the show both informative and entertaining in equal measures.
You went from something to something else.
Yes.
Way to go.
I love all the background research done, and the guys
Jesus.
do a fantastic job keeping everything interesting. Looking forward to more going forward.
Did you just try a Russian thing? Man?
Yeah, just mixing all this shit in. Love the jingles, and I didn't want to hear the No iTunes Review jingle again. Magnum OIK on the forums.
You know, I thought that was going to work.
Yeah, you
obviously it did.
Well, for one person it did, yeah.
Yes.
I should just play it anyway.
Seriously, thank you for that review, Mr. Magnum Oik.
Yep.
These guys are awesome. By Figurine Pigeon on the 20th of September, 2015. I don't know what accent I'm trying to do either.
Like a Jason Statham mixed with
maybe Jason
Michael
Statham. I've only just started listening to these guys, and all I can say is how awesome they are. Every podcast, I can't fucking keep going. Every podcast so far that I've listened to has been in depth and funny, and I like the banter between them both. I especially like that these guys are proper Final Fantasy fans and seriously know their stuff and don't talk no rubbish like some podcasts I listen to. I have listened to.
Yes.
Oh shit! I lost the fucking Michael Caine. I can't bring it back. Not that I had it before.
Ah, that was close.
All I'm going to say is, if you don't want in-depth knowledge, I can't do it, about all the Final Fantasy games and its universe, then I highly recommend listening to Ultimate Final Fantasy. These guys never cease to amaze. Keep up the good work, dudes.
Thank you.
Thank you, dude.
Yeah,
That was really nice.
always appreciate that.
Okay. The reviews are the best part. This is a lesser review.
Oh, a 4-star.
A 4-star review from North America. Our own countrymen giving us less than 5 stars.
I think we'll be okay.
How dare they? Okay. This is from Shipyard Locked on September 18th. The episodes where they review specific games are the most interesting and useful, a great way to revisit and rethink long games you've already played or ones you missed out on, like FF11. In general, the other episodes, with exceptions like the one on difficulty, are not as meaty and satisfying. Oh, it can get it nice and meaty.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Meaty.
I do love meat.
You want me to satisfy you with my meat?
I think that's what he's asking for, yeah.
They're not as meaty and satisfying. They should do an episode on monster design, both tactical and aesthetic, across the history of the franchise. What worked and what didn't. This is an aspect of these games that is frequently overlooked and worth exploring. Thank you for your review. Monster design, huh?
That would be an interesting episode, I guess.
It's hard to do things. It's
that
hard
are
to
visual
yeah,
and
it's hard
in
to
audio
do
form.
Yeah, exactly. This is a podcast, and so doing things on visual stuff is difficult. That's why we talk about like mythical origins of the monsters.
Yeah.
And all we can say is whether or not we liked it. It's going to be hard to like paint a picture where it's like if someone doesn't know what you're talking about, you're like, remember the horns and then the wingspan or the purple. I don't fucking know what to say there.
It would be
See?
tough, yeah.
So I don't know. That's a decent idea for like a video podcast, but I don't think we can take it on this one. But thank you for your review.
Yeah. All right. So we have probably
This
the
is my
greatest.
favorite review of the week.
This is probably the favorite review ever.
Thank you everybody for giving us reviews, but Jesus Christ, this review right here is
All right.
amazing.
So it's titled "Audio Erotic Asphyxiation."
We got the super sexy jingle in the background. We just have it on repeat.
You think so?
Yeah, just quiet and like turn it down a little bit, you know? Come on, you can find it. There you go. Just like play it. Oh yeah, there we go.
All right, so
You should press the L button so it loops.
audio as fucker.
Okay, there you go.
Audio Erotic Asphyxiation by Gammon Spork.
Oh, yeah.
A 5-star review.
5 stars.
When I am not listening to Gwar, I fill my ear holes with the dulcet sounds, or dulcet tones of UFF.
Oh, yeah.
Really? What can I add? The other 5-star reviews hit the nail on the head. These guys explore everything Final Fantasy, what it was, and what it has spawned. And they are the only show looking at FF as a whole. In a few years, when I am old... In a few years, when I am old, gray, and flaccid, the baritone bedroom voices of Joe and Caleb will be the only pill I need to help me perform my husbandly duties.
Oh, my God.
Subscribe.
Thank you, Gammon Spork. I believe you're probably Gammon Stark on the forums, so thank you.
There's a pretty good chance of that, yes.
You still need the jingles in order to end the show, by the way.
That's a good point, yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody who gave us iTunes reviews.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Ultima Final Fantasy. Like we'll follow us on Twitter as well. It's subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitter at UFF Podcast. Kind of try to be on there a little more often, but it's whatever.
Yeah, you can also find us at facebook.com/Ultima Final Fantasy. Support us on Patreon. Our new website is, of course, brought to you by our new Patreon donors.
Yeah, thank you very much, you guys who already do.
Twitch.tv/Ultima Final Fantasy. See the show live most Saturdays at around noon. We got started a little late today. Sorry, I'm having hiccups.
You dying over there?
It's like killing me. And of course, join our website, ultimafinalfantasy.com. There are now forums just there. It's not ultimafinalfantasy.boards.net anymore.
Yep.
Well, they're still there, and we're going to switch over in like the next 2 weeks, I say. Everybody kind of get off of ultimafinalfantasy.boards.net and move over to ultimafinalfantasy.com.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, so
please join us there. And we just did the iTunes reviews. Thank you for everybody who left us iTunes reviews.
Oh, shit,
Please
we have one more thing.
Leave us more iTunes reviews. We got one more thing to go to, and that's the questions from us to who?
To them.
To who?
Well, to you, I guess.
To you. All right, so we didn't do questions from us to you last week, but the week before I did ask you guys whether or not, like, what Final Fantasy game you were looking most forward to
For next year.
Okay. And so
I'm pretty sure I know which one won.
I put up FF Explorers and Final Fantasy XV and a couple other things, and all the votes were for Final Fantasy XV except for one. One person voted Explorers, and it was Crinitol, I believe.
Really? Oh, it's because
based upon what he posted. And he said the reason he's more excited for Explorers is because he doesn't have a PS4 for Final Fantasy XV.
Wow.
So my suggestion for Crinitol out there,
buy a PS4.
buy a PS4.
Yeah.
I mean,
Explorers.
I'm excited to see what Explorers is going to be. It will be a long time before we ever hit Explorers in our run of this show.
Yeah, true.
But the game I'm most excited for is Final Fantasy XV. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah, it's the next numbered game in the series.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like the biggest deal.
what else could possibly compete other than Explorers, of course? But yeah, good stuff.
So, yeah, that's going to be it for this week. I want to thank you guys for joining us, and we got a big Final Fantasy XIII review coming up, so stay tuned for that.
And always, as always, enjoy the grind, you guys.
This has been another production of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast. The show was produced by Joseph DeGollier and Caleb Schweiss, with music and editing by Joseph DeGollier, parodies and clips from their respective authors, of course. You can get all of our episodes as well as our Let's Plays at ultimafinalfantasy.com. You can also contact us on Twitter at UFF Podcast, as well as our contact page on our website. Be sure to subscribe and review our podcast. Your reviews may get read on the show, and look forward to the next episode of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast.
From Provo, Utah, this is the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast with your host, Joseph DeGollier.
Stop the stream!